Gray Penner was on page 120th of Clive Cussler's new novel when he heard his wife's car finally pull into the garage. He touched his Fitbit and saw the time. 2017. He winced. This is the third time this week that his wife has been late at work. Until 4 months ago, in all 7 years of their marriage, she had never come home late. Gray was not born yesterday or the day before yesterday. The first few times Kelly called to report the delay, he didn't think anything of it. Then he noticed that one evening, when she returned home later than usual, her lipstick was slightly smeared, which was almost unheard of, since Kelly is practically obsessed with her appearance. He was sure he had noticed the foreign scent of aftershave when she leaned in to kiss him, so that night in bed he deliberately pressed himself against her neck as he stroked her from behind with a spoon. He didn't know much about scents, but he knew there was a significant difference between the White Shoulders perfume he bought her and whatever the hell she smelled like. Crap. Gray almost gasped when his red-haired wife walked through the door. At 30, he felt that she was still as beautiful as when he first saw her in college, and his almost convulsive sigh was his usual reaction whenever he saw her after being separated for several hours or more. Entering the house, Kelly smiled to herself as she saw her husband's usual reaction. She knew his reaction was a sincere compliment, and besides, she had to admit to herself that she was turned on by her husband finding her attractive so soon after she had touched another man's lips. "Hey, honey," she said, moving closer to him, kissing him quickly on the lips and turning to head upstairs, her now invisible smirk both confident and condescending. "Make yourself comfortable. I'll be down in a minute." While his wife entered the house and went upstairs, Gray did not say a word, and she did not seem to notice. However, he noted the now familiar smell of aftershave lotion. Not for the first time, he furrowed his brow as he walked up the stairs, anticipating the impending confrontation that had to happen soon if he wanted to save his marriage. At this point, Gray was confident that his wife had not yet crossed the line in her relationship with handsome Paco Rabanne, as he mentally called her potential seducer, but in his opinion, she was getting closer. For 7 years, Gray feared that his beautiful wife would one day realize that she had married a man unworthy of her from an aesthetic point of view and would try to make amends. Gray did not consider himself an ugly man, but in his opinion, he had an average appearance and could not compare in any way with his stunningly beautiful wife. The snake that invaded the Garden of Eden was named Johann Wegmann. Kelly worked as an assistant vice president for an international telecommunications company. Johann was a well-built 40-year-old blonde man who had moved to work from the company's headquarters in the Netherlands about 6 months ago. For the first 2 weeks, Gray heard far more than he wanted to about the Dutch settler, before Kelly went completely silent. Gray became suspicious. "Hey, is that new Dutch guy still working in your office?" Gray asked over dinner one night as Kelly talked about her day. "Yes. Why are you asking?" She answered, somewhat embarrassed. "For weeks, he was the only one you talked about." "And now it's like he's completely disappeared," Gray said. "Well, he works in a different department. We rarely see each other," she said, her face turning slightly red. "Huh," Gray muttered, stuffing his mouth with food and noticing that his wife had just lied to his face. The late evenings began soon after. Kelly felt a physical attraction to the 6'3", 102-pound Dutchman from the first moment she met him. In addition to his physical attractiveness, he exuded a self-confidence that almost bordered on arrogance. He spoke 3 languages and had dark blue eyes that, according to Kelly, looked into her soul every time he looked at her. If she was being honest, she had to admit that when Johann smiled at her for the first time, she felt butterflies in her stomach. In fact, Kelly and Johann did not work in different departments and communicated quite often at work. Within a couple of weeks after Johann joined the company, The two of them began going to lunch together. Kelly loved her husband and did not even think about the fact that she and Johan were starting a relationship. Johan, for his part, was well aware that his relationship with Kelly was developing because he gently pushed her to do so. Johan knew that this woman was married, but he believed that she would let him know if he went too far. In his country, extramarital affairs were not anathema. 2 weeks later, they were working on a project that they didn't finish by the end of the day. Johan suggested that they start the project again in the morning or just spend a little extra time in the evening in the office. Her smile told him everything he wanted to know. She quickly called Gray at his office and said that she would be late for a couple of hours. He noted to himself that this was the first time she had been late in all the years of work in the company. But since he also had to be late at work sometimes, he did not complain and said that he would cook dinner that evening. She admired how attentive he was. They left the office at 7 o'clock, although they finished work at about 6:30. Both kept track of time. Working, or rather staying up late, became a habit for the couple, who initially spent their time talking. Then it turned into touching, hugging, and kissing. Kelly was well aware that she was teetering on the edge of a slippery slope, but she liked that she had a husband and a boyfriend. In fact, she was so caught up in her feelings that she either didn't notice or didn't care that her husband noticed. After graduating from college, Gray got a good position with a good salary at a small local telecommunications firm. Kelly, who had the same education as Gray, began working in a less senior position at an international firm. They planned not to have children until they were 30. It was also soon decided that Kelly would be the first to return to online college to earn an MBA and advance within her company. After she gets her master's degree, it will be Gray's turn so that he too can advance in his career. Kelly completed her master's degree in 4 years and soon received a promotion that put her salary and position in the company above her husband's. He was very proud of his wife and was pleased that their career plan was working. Carried away by her own financial and personal success, Kelly lost sight of their overall marital plan. When it was Gray's turn to get a master's degree, she said they should instead use the money to buy a house in which to raise their children. Gray was unhappy that his dreams didn't come first, but had to admit that buying a house for their future family was a good idea. He could always go back to college in a couple of years, she reminded him. Kelly always had something serious in mind for the couple to spend their money on rather than Gray's MBA. He didn't want to seem selfish, so he always agreed with his wife's wishes. Kelly's ego really liked the fact that she was the main breadwinner of the family and that she had the biggest job of the couple. She began to perceive herself as the more equal among two equal partners. Kelly had butterflies in her stomach as she walked down the stairs. She loves her husband, but she needs Johan. She needs to feel him inside her. She needs to spend nights with him. She needs to cuddle with him after sex. But she could not cheat on her husband and must first tell him about it so that it does not become cheating. She knew that he loved her as much as she loved him, and that he would give her this one weekend, this license to have sex on the side. He never refused her anything. Dinner. In the microwave. You just need to turn it on for a minute, Gray said as Kelly appeared downstairs. Thanks, babe. I'll bring everything now. Can we talk? She asked. Gray looked up from his book. Dirk Pitt. Will have to wait? Gray realized that Kelly had something important to say. Did this have anything to do with what he wanted to talk to her about soon? I want a free pass this weekend, Gray, Kelly said hesitantly but clearly. Gray froze in his place on the couch. His brain began to work intermittently. He hoped he didn't look as dazed as he felt. He felt like his insides wanted to burst out. Sorry? He asked, realizing that he had actually heard his wife correctly. I need to spend the whole weekend with Johan Wegman, she replied. We have feelings that need to be tested. Once. Only one. I love you, Gray, not him. And after this weekend, I will come back to you and spend the rest of my life showing you how much I love you. Gray felt even more nauseous as he realized that Kelly had ruined their marriage with her question. However, he decided that this tragedy needed to be played out to the end. What if after this weekend you decide that once is not enough? What if you decide you need him for more than one weekend? If you decide that you need him more than me? It will not happen. I promise, she said quickly. Is it true? And how can you promise such a thing? 12 years ago you already promised me. You swore that you would leave everyone else for me, and now you are going to easily break that promise. She blushed again and began to look anywhere but directly at him. I need this, Gray, and I know you love me enough to give it to me, she whispered. To be clear, Kelly, you don't need it, but you definitely want it, and you're hoping I'll be stupid enough to give it to you. This will not happen, he said again. But you are not my property, so if you really want to, you can do it. Just remember that for every action, there is an equal reaction. Thank you, Gray. I'm glad you understand, Kelly said. No, baby, don't try to pretend that you misunderstood me. I just told you to do what you think is right, and then I will do what I have to do, he said. As you say, she replied. When Gray walked through the door the next evening, Kelly was sitting at the kitchen table drinking coffee. As he entered, he noticed a small bag standing near the door. She's definitely dressed for the evening, he thought, noticing that she was wearing one of her sexiest dresses, a cornflower blue, mid-thigh length one that showed off a fair amount of cleavage. You seem pretty confident in yourself, Gray said, putting his keys and wallet on the shelf. She smiled flirtatiously. I am confident in my beloved husband, she said quietly. He raised an eyebrow. Now kiss me goodbye and have a good weekend. Don't sulk, she said. Gray wanted to grab her arms and shake her until her head fell off. Instead, he gave her his saddest smile and shook his head. God, how I loved you, baby, he whispered, turned and went upstairs. Although she realized he didn't kiss her goodbye, Kelly didn't notice Gray's use of the past tense of love as she left the house. Her thoughts were already several miles away, where Johan was waiting for her arrival. She felt like a 16-year-old virgin going to her first prom. Kelly and Johan had been planning their weekend for the past 2 weeks. After 3 months of increasingly frequent kissing and caressing, they decided it was time to see where their relationship would lead. Johan didn't mind that Kelly was married. She told him that she and her husband were working on some issues in their marriage. She met Johan in the hotel lobby, and they checked in as Mr. and Mrs. Johan Wegman. We went up to our room and threw our bags. Before leaving the room, Johan asked Kelly to spin around in front of him. He whistled softly in response and then pulled her towards him for a deep, passionate kiss. His tongue searched and quickly found hers in her mouth. She moaned deeply. God, this man knows how to kiss, she thought. Their table at an upscale steakhouse was booked for 7 o'clock that evening, so they had to unpack and hit the road. Dinner was amazing. They drank a bottle of good wine, but only one each, because they both wanted to be on top. For dessert, they each took ice cream. During the meal, they talked in low voices, enjoying each other's company. They touched each other tenderly. To any observer, they looked like a very loving married couple. On the snack table next to Gray's reclining chair were the remains of a medium-sized pepperoni pizza and 4 empty beer bottles. Despite the fact that Gray was a fairly experienced cook, he, of course, had no intention of cooking that evening. After some thought, he decided that pizza and beer were the ideal food for the evening when his wife would be giving her body to another man. After finishing his meal, Gray went upstairs to the bedroom with several large garbage bags. He spent the next 30 minutes haphazardly bagging all of Kelly's clothes, then went downstairs and piled them up by the front door. He handled the jewelry and toiletries a little more carefully, putting them in a box and also placing them by the door. Somewhat satisfied and indescribably angry, Gray went downstairs, put the DVD in the player and sat down to watch his favorite movie of all time, the Mel Brooks classic, Young Frankenstein. Kelly and Johann barely had time to return to their room when he pressed his lips to hers. She grabbed him by the neck and they stood there for about a minute, kissing passionately. From what she saw through the pants of his suit in the office, Kelly believed that Johann's assets were a little larger and thicker than her husband's, especially considering Johann's size advantage. He was 15 centimeters taller than her husband and 18 kilograms heavier. Johann studied Kelly's body very carefully, slowly removing her clothes, kissing her neck, shoulders, and chest as they were exposed. Finding herself completely naked, Kelly reached for Johann's belt with trembling hands. Everything happened too quickly, much faster than she expected. Johann praised his partner very much as they lay intertwined, but did not make a single move to satisfy his partner. She was disappointed, but knew they still had a lot of time. After a 20-minute break, Kelly tried to get her partner interested again, knowing that her husband sometimes needed just that long to get back into the game. She was again disappointed. The next day, Saturday, the couple had a full day of active recreation planned before another luxurious dinner and subsequent carnal pleasures. Kelly hoped that the previous evening was just a misunderstanding, and of course today everything would be different. Gray spent the entire Saturday afternoon alone, not even turning on the TV until the sun set. No matter how he looked at his dilemma, he saw no way to remain married to his wife. He knew he still loved her. It didn't go away overnight. But he couldn't get over the disrespect she'd been showing him lately, and he'd never be able to trust her again, expecting her to use her when she wanted to. Some other guy will again demand free passage. On the screen in front of him, there was a rerun of the show, Leave It to Beaver, but instead there could have been porn if Gray wanted it, and there it was. He took another sip of his beer and stared straight ahead, thinking back to happier times with Kelly. In truth, Gray never understood how they ended up together. As undergraduates at Arizona State University, they took several courses together, but Gray had no idea that this amazing girl might know who he was. She always seemed to have a small circle of admirers, but early in her freshman year, she took a seat next to him in his accounting class. She seemed to go out of her way to flirt with him during class, and completely shocked him by inviting him for coffee when class ended. Of course, the young man agreed. They were practically inseparable for the rest of their college years and got married about 6 months after graduation. A few months ago, Gray was sure that their relationship would last for a long time. However, recent events showed cracks in their marriage, and then Kelly did the unthinkable. Kelly lay in bed next to the sleeping Johann, wondering how much sucking up she would have to do to get her husband to forgive her for the untimely weekend. She had heard the words her husband had said to her when she had told, about the free pass, but she knew Gray loved her too much to let one weekend ruin their marriage. However, she also never thought that she would have to worry about her husband while she was with Johann. The day spent with Johann had been wonderful. He had excellent manners and a magnificent personal charm, but upon returning to his room on the second night, his charm seemed to have deserted him again. He was again selfish and clumsy, despite the fact that the woman again gave him the opportunity to doubt himself. She wouldn't even call what they were doing sex. Yes, Johann tried to be physical, but it was more like moving a saw in and out than anything else, and he didn't care about his partner at all, in her opinion. And that's why I pissed Gray off? She thought to herself. God, what a fool I am. After Sex in the Do, Have a Nice Brunch, Johann smiled as he and Mrs. Wegman left the hotel. All this time, Kelly was kind and smiling. They kissed passionately in the parking lot. Kelly considered it the most passionate part of the weekend, then got into their cars and drove home. Kelly used the hour-long drive home to clear her head and strengthen her position in a long-running dispute with her husband over her free passage permit. She was confident that Gray would eventually give in, despite his initial anger and threats. In the end, she almost always got her way. At worst, she thought, she will order sexy lingerie and stiletto heels, and maybe a leather bustier. She couldn't help but smile, thinking about how easy it was to trick a man around her finger. Kelly drove the car into the garage and turned off the engine. She checked her makeup again in the rearview mirror, took her bag from the back seat, took a deep breath, and walked into the house with her head held high. "Hey, I'm home!" she shouted, entering the kitchen from the garage. She waited a couple of seconds for Gray to greet her, which would have been normal, but she was disappointed. She heard the big screen on in the living room and went in, irritated by what she thought was her husband's childish behavior. Gray sat in his reclining chair, watching a baseball game. Looking up from the screen for a second, he nodded towards his wife, not paying attention to her. Needless to say, she was unhappy. "Is this how you plan to play this out?" "Okay," she pouted and left the room. What the hell do all those bags at the front door mean?" she shouted. When Gray didn't answer, Kelly walked over and opened the package. He heard her gasp, then heard more bags being opened. "Damn it, it's not funny, Gray. What the hell are you doing?" she shouted. "To make it easier for you to move out when I give you the divorce papers," he answered, surprising her by silently approaching her almost closely. "No divorce. There will be no divorce, you idiot," she said. "We talked about this. This is just one weekend. One. We've been married for 12 years. You can give me one weekend. First of all, we didn't talk. It was you who spoke, and I listened. You told me that you take permission to have sex on the side. When it was my turn to speak, I said I wasn't going to accept it. It's not my problem that you didn't take me seriously. We are married. That means no permits, ever," Gray said. "Will you actually divorce me because of one weekend out of the entire time we were together, and all the time we will be together in the future?" she asked. Now there was panic in her voice. "We won't be together in the future since you did that. I told you this." "Which, I'll do what I have to word, didn't you understand?" Gray growled. Tears began to flow from Kelly's eyes. For perhaps the first time in their marriage, Gray did not move closer to his wife to console her. "You cheated on me with another man. Just because you told me about it first doesn't mean it's not cheating, especially after I told you not to do it," Gray said. "You didn't tell me not to do it. You said I could make my own choice," she said, trying to turn the argument in her favor. "And be responsible for the consequences of your actions. It seems you can only remember what you want to remember," Gray said. Kelly literally stood still for several seconds, looking at her things in the bags. She was breathing heavily. "Well, I'm not moving out. This is my home too," she said. "Okay, but since your things are already packed, you can move your junk to the guest room." "I'm staying in the master's room," Gray said. "Okay," she grumbled and carried the bags up the stairs. "Will you help me?" "I've already done my part of the work," he answered. "I've collected my things." Gray returned to the living room and continued watching the baseball game. He heard his wife stomping up the stairs and muttering something. Finally making it downstairs, Kelly plopped down on the living room couch and began flipping through the Sunday newspaper that Gray had placed on the end table next to where she usually sat. She began flipping through the newspaper noisily, making sure it crackled every time she turned a page or changed position in her seat. "Don't you at least want to ask how my weekend was?" she pouted. Why do I need it? I believe you had sex with him several times. Isn't that what people do when they cheat on their husbands? Gray asked. Well, we also went to some places, did some things, and ate at some nice restaurants, she whined. Cute. Happy for you, Gray said. Maybe one of your friends will be interested. But your husband, not yet a husband. No. Gray noticed that his wife didn't seem nearly as excited as he'd expected, especially after she'd made such a fuss about her departure. The fact that she wanted to talk about non-sexual experiences suggested that Johan might be more of a loser than a stud. But that's not my problem, Gray thought. Gray spent time Monday separating bank accounts and making financial maneuvers necessary for his pending divorce. He wouldn't be able to get an appointment with the family lawyer he'd chosen until a week later, so he knew he'd have to live in the same house with Kelly for a while. Kelly spent the day avoiding Johan. She was well aware that they were on opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of the weekend's success. She knew that their relationship had changed forever, and not for the better. She really wanted her husband to understand this and return to her, so that with Gray's help she could ward off Johan's future advances. Kelly's life suddenly became very difficult. Kelly was wondering what to do. Talk to Gray again or just move on as if nothing had happened, hoping that her husband would eventually cool down. She chose the second option as the path of least resistance, not wanting her husband to call her a cheater again. After some time spent looking at the situation from all sides, Kelly was forced to admit that the word cheater sounded much more accurate than loving wife. She shook her head sadly, wondering if she would have looked at the situation differently if her weekend had been a resounding success rather than a dismal failure. Gray didn't say a word to Kelly when he returned from work and when they sat down to dinner. When he finished eating, he mumbled a quick thank you and cleared away his plate. Sorry, Gray. I'm so sorry, Kelly whined as Gray walked into the living room. After all these years, I thought you loved me enough to give me a weekend. Do I love you enough? I would think that after all these years you would love me enough to not ask permission to cheat on me, Gray said. How selfish and deluded do you have to be? The next day at work, things went even worse for Kelly. 5 minutes after she entered her office, one of her best friends at the firm walked in and closed the door, which was not a very common occurrence in the office. Please tell me you didn't spend the weekend with the Dutch Thor, Emma Lassalle asked in a half-whisper, even though the door was closed. Kelly's eyes opened wide. Was he bragging? No, 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 she croaked, her face contorted with shame and anger. I suppose if it doesn't come from you, it does from him, Emma said, but I didn't hear it from him. I heard several girls whispering about it in the break room while I was drinking coffee. If they are whispering at 8 in the morning, then by noon, the whole office will be talking about it. Now this can no longer be hidden. Kelly put her head in her hands. Emma watched as tears fell onto her desk. Yes, you have become that special one that all women hate, and every guy now wants to get his piece. Well, was it good? She asked, raising her eyebrows. This is the biggest problem. Did not have. I made my husband very angry and for what? She asked. Johan is big, handsome, charming, and an absolute dummy in bed. He's barely bigger than Gray, and in bed he's not even half the man he is, but he considers himself God's gift to women. Emma's shocked look turned into one of concern. So, how much time and apologies does it take to win back your husband's affection? Emma asked, without the slightest hint of a smile. I wish it were that simple, Kelly replied. Gray constantly talks about divorce, 7 years together, and he keeps talking about divorce, directly. No, I'll think about it. No consultations, nothing. I thought he would just be angry, but he is beside himself with rage. I've never seen him so reckless. But I warned him. Yes, but if he didn't approve of it, your warning means nothing. You're a smart woman and you really can't deny that you knew how this could end, Emma said. Coincidentally, Grace said almost the same words to Kelly 2 weeks later when she called in tears after being served divorce papers at the office. You told me I could have sex with him. He said I could, she sobbed into the phone. No, I told you that this is your choice, but it will have consequences. You got what you wanted and obviously it didn't matter what I wanted, Gray said. A few weeks later, Gray received a call from his father-in-law and mother-in-law asking him to talk to their daughter and think about reconciliation. Gray loved his relatives and always got along well with them, so he tried to gently disappoint them. She says she made a mistake, and you don't want to talk to her. You don't let her explain everything, his father-in-law harshly accused. You're above this, Gray. Did she make a mistake? Did she really call it that? Gray said this with more than slight irony in his voice. Well, she never actually told us what the mistake was, but after 7 years, don't you think you should show her some courtesy? Said Ken Clayton. She didn't tell you the whole story, Ken. I wouldn't call it a mistake that she gave herself permission to have weekend sex with a coworker. I warned her there would be consequences, Gray said. Oh no, no, she couldn't be that stupid, Ken cried. Gray did not consider it necessary to respond to what he was sure was a rather rhetorical remark. I'm really sorry, Ken said. I do not know what else to say. I won't bother you anymore. The day after his conversation with her father, Gray groaned when he saw Kelly calling him. Another whine is coming, he thought. I'm sorry, Gray, that my father called. I think you realize that I wasn't very open with my parents. It's not something you admit to unless you have to. I never thought that he would call, and I never thought that you would rat me out, she said quietly. I didn't rat you out, but I told the truth, he answered without emotion. Yes, she sighed. Kelly and her lawyer tried to delay the divorce, but given that Gray filed due to irreconcilable differences and the absence of children, it took 9 months. Kelly couldn't believe Gray didn't give her a second chance after her mistake, as she repeatedly called it. The mistake wasn't just about having sex with another man, Kelly, he explained one evening when she tried to convince him. Long before you cheated with him, you had an emotional affair. You neglected my feelings. She disrespected me in the worst possible way. When did you stop loving me? Kelly held back tears. Once upon a time, when she cried, Gray tried to console her. Now he accused her of trying to break through her tears back into his heart. I know you still love me, Gray. Why can't we try to make peace? Yes, I still love you. That's why it hurts me so much, Gray replied. But it seems to me that you don't love me as much as I love you. I would never think about cheating on you, ever. But I can't believe that you won't do it again when a second man attracts your attention. There will be no second man. I promise, she quickly intervened. There shouldn't have been a first one, Gray grumbled. You promised this when you swore an oath to me. Oh yes, she whispered. During the divorce, Johan asked Kelly out on several dates, as did several of her other work colleagues. The woman was talked about in the office, and a few weeks after the incident, she was called to the HR department. We do not have a policy prohibiting employees from making acquaintances, but we have always asked our employees to exercise some discretion. If half the male employees are talking about how you spent the weekend, playing family with Johan Wegman, and half the female employees are talking about who's next on your list, that's not a good situation. If the fuss doesn't subside, you may be asked to move to another office. I've been told that Maine is very beautiful this time of year, the HR director said. A day later, Johan again found himself in Kelly's face and asked the woman on a date. After the HR director's warning, she was not in the mood. "Well, baby, your husband is divorcing you. We won't even need to leave town for the weekend," Johan said. "Don't you understand the hints?" she snapped. "I ruined my marriage for mediocre sex that I just wanted." Mediocre sex. I was such an idiot. "Now go away," Kelly screamed. 2 weeks later, Kelly agreed to move to North Carolina. By the time she left, everyone in the company knew that Johan was not the stud he thought he was. A month later, Johan transferred again to the Amsterdam office. He is handsome, fit, and every Saturday morning he walks through the aisles of the grocery store as if he were sluggish, as she noticed from a couple of meters away. He never seemed to notice her, which was the norm in her life. Margaret Scanlon, known to her close friends as Peggy, worked as a fifth-grade teacher at a local elementary school. Her appearance was average. Her physique, as she considered it, was average, which meant she had nothing to attract a handsome, obviously lonely man. She is 29 years old, and in a few weeks she must cross the threshold of 30, with no prospects of leaving bachelor life anytime soon. Peggy wondered how a man as attractive as him could still be single. He looks to be about 30. He doesn't come across as a player, and he looks lost, perhaps broken. Graypenner doesn't have a wedding ring on his left hand, but Peggy knew he was single before she even looked at his hand. The items in his cart said everything about his marital status: Pop-Tarts, frozen pizza, macaroni and cheese, beer, and grilled meats. Nothing says singleness, and maybe even divorce, like these products. Many people call Peggy Mouse. She has short, wavy, light brown hair, large brown eyes, and light, almost pale skin. She was 5'5" tall, had average breasts, decent legs, and what she considered her best feature, a muscular round ass. Personality-wise, she would describe herself as a quiet person. In college, her friends considered her an ideal partner, thanks to her friendliness, loyalty, and ordinary appearance. She had first noticed the man while passing by a few months earlier. For some reason that she still can't figure out, she continued to notice him, and about 2 months ago she started paying closer attention to him. Although it was completely out of character for her, she considered introducing herself to him. If only... "I know this may seem a little cavalier, but I am Peggy Scanlon. Would you like to have a cup of coffee with me?" Peggy asked a few weeks later, approaching the man. Gray stepped back and looked closely at the woman who had just verbally addressed him. Sure, she wasn't stunning like Kelly, and not many people were, but there was something about her look that made him agree. Something in her eyes made him want to know more about this mysterious woman. For the first time in the last 2 years, he treated a woman in more than just a friendly manner. "Yes, I think that would be great," Gray answered readily. Peggy Scanlon was an open book. Moreover, it was easy to read. In her 29 years, she hadn't dated often, and never seriously. She seemed smart and well-read, and he listened carefully as she talked about her past. Having finished her story, she sat silently and waited for him to tell about his past. She looked carefully into his eyes and decided that he was single because he was divorced. There was pain in his eyes that only someone who was deeply wounded could know. She watched him think. She saw that he was trying to figure out exactly how much he should tell about himself, and he told almost his entire story, while she sat in tense attention. When he finished, they both sat in silence. He sighed heavily and looked at the woman as if the whole weight of the world had been lifted from his shoulders. "Sorry for dumping all this on you," he said, looking up. "You are the first person I told the whole story to. They told me that I have such an influence on people. I'm also pretty good with small children and dogs," the woman said. Gray chuckled. He felt very comfortable with this stranger, almost like he did with Kelly. Before they went their separate ways, Gray made a date for the following Friday evening. On their third date, they had sex for the first time. Peggy tried to hold out longer, but turned out to be the weaker partner. There was something incredibly sexy about Gray's calm, reserved demeanor that she couldn't resist, even though he never made any overt sexual maneuvers. After a pleasant dinner at a Hungarian restaurant, Gray invited Peggy to his apartment for coffee and alcohol. At first, they sat next to each other in a love seat in the living room, and then Peggy leaned towards Gray and pressed her lips to his. 10 minutes later, they were lying naked in Gray's bedroom. Over the next hour, he tenderly made love to the woman. He noted to himself that for the first time after the divorce, he was making love with someone. In other cases, sex was just sex. During classes, he always kissed a woman. What? She muttered, clinging to him after they finished. Silence. We'll have plenty of time to talk later. What are you doing in the next few decades? He remarked. Peggy smiled tiredly at him, and he pressed his lips to hers. A woman who was a bridesmaid 4 times finally found herself in the spotlight after a year. They subsequently had a couple of children, a boy 2 years after the wedding and a girl 2 years later. Unlike her predecessor, Peggy never forgot her vows. And although Gray will never know it, Kelly will never forget this lesson either. A few years after moving to North Carolina, she remarried and remained faithful to her second husband for 15 years until she caught him cheating. She admitted to herself that she finally understood all the pain that Gray had endured and wasted no time in divorcing her second husband. Kelly always took care of herself and still went to the gym regularly. At 50 years old, she was still an attractive woman, unmarried, alone, and approaching 50 years of age. This was something she never imagined, even in her wildest dreams. Her second husband was 10 years older than her. He had no children, and he did not want to have them with Kelly. Now it's too late. She laughed out loud, or rather barked. Gray wanted 2 children, she wanted 3. So, by this time, all 3 of the couple's children would already be in their teens. She and Gray would attend various school and community events, sports, music, parenting. Both high school and college graduations are just around the corner, followed by weddings and grandchildren. And all this was lost, for the sake of mediocre sex. What a dumbass she was. She shook her head sadly for what must have been the 1,000th time. A few months later, on the other side of the country, Gray and Peggy Penner, along with their 15-year-old son Reggie, sat in the gym of the local high school and watched their 18-year-old daughter Phyllis receive her diploma. Peggy squeezed her husband's hand, and they exchanged glances with happy tears in their eyes. Gray leaned over and gave his wife a quick peck on the lips, causing his son to wince in teenage embarrassment. Well, that's enough, you two. Not here and not now, he whined. The parents smiled at him, then at each other, and both raised their eyebrows. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one. Second story. Once upon a time in the Garden of Eden, it was a beautiful sunny day. Birds sang, butterflies fluttered, and at the periphery a stream gently babbled over the stones. Beautiful flowering and fruit trees stood straight. There were a lot of flowers. In the morning, Eve wandered alone while Adam explored another part of the garden. A voice brought her out of her thoughts. "Hi, beauty. Beautiful morning. As always, isn't it?" The snake hissed. "Oh yeah, it is very beautiful here. I really like it here. I hope we never have to leave," she told him. "Hey, have you ever tried this?" asked the snake, handing her a beautiful apple. "No, we are not allowed to eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge. God said we can eat the fruit of any other tree, but not this one," she said. "But not only is it very tasty, but if you eat it, you will know as much as God. In fact, You will practically become a god yourself. God is not here now, and he will never know. What could it harm? It was a beautiful, sunny Saturday morning. Kenny Richardson still had 2 sections of his yard left to finish. He was sweating in his t-shirt, but he was smiling widely. He loved the look of his lush, dark green lawn, especially after it was mowed. Although he could have easily afforded a lawn tractor, he much preferred the level surface provided by a non-propelled lawnmower. He winced when he saw an Apex courier truck pull up to his side. His wife, Callie, is out grocery shopping, which means he'll have to take a long break from cutting his hair to sign for a package or envelope the courier has delivered. He hated to stop mowing before finishing. "Man, that's some impressive grass you have," the delivery guy said as Kenny walked up to him. "Yes, all premium blue. None of this mixture of crap that everyone is pushing. I don't mind the rye part, but I hate the fine fescue." "Fescue is creeping weeds, damn cousin," Kenny said. "What do you have here for me?" "Well, actually it's for your wife, but you can sign if you show me your ID," the courier said. Kenny pulled out his driver's license from the pocket of his shorts. The courier took a photo of him, thanked him, and handed Kenny an envelope. Kenny looked through it and carried it into the house without opening it, after which he returned outside and finished mowing just as his wife drove up to the house. "I'll bring the packages. There's an envelope for you on the table that some fancy courier delivered a few minutes ago," Kenny said. Kenny took 4 steps from the car to the kitchen table, carrying groceries into the house. As he put down the last package, he found his wife of 35 years seated on the living room sofa, sobbing quietly as she looked at several pieces of paper. "Someone died, baby?" Kenny asked. Callie looked up from her papers and tried to speak, but no sound came out of her mouth. Kenny hadn't seen such an expression on her face since she learned of her mother's death several years ago. He sat down next to her on the sofa, wrapped his arms around her body, and hugged her tightly. They sat in this position for several minutes until Callie's tears finally subsided. "Ian Ross died yesterday," Callie whispered, barely audibly. Kenny knew his wife was close to her former boss, but he was surprised by the extent of her grief. They had worked closely together for about 10 years, but had not seen each other since Kenny and Callie moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, from Phoenix, Arizona, about 10 years ago. Kenny knew he probably wasn't the most sensitive person in the world, but this level of grief for his former employer seemed excessive. Kenny quickly remembered how Callie worked for Ian. She always considered him an impeccable gentleman and a wonderful mentor. He remembered that, a couple of years before they moved, she worried about him after the death of his longtime wife. But he had apparently gotten over his grief and illness by the time Kenny and his wife moved in, when Kenny got his big promotion. "I need to go back to Phoenix for a funeral. It will be in 3 days," Callie said. "Do you need to go to the funeral?" Kenny asked. "Necessary?" Callie looked straight into her husband's eyes. They had been together long enough for him to see the real anger in them. "Yes, I need to go," she muttered. "Well, that means we need to go," Kenny said. "If it's so important to you, then it's our business." If Kenny expected his wife to be happy about his announcement of her support, he was mistaken. She continued to stare at him. "You don't need to come with me. I'm already a big girl. I've traveled alone before," she said. "Even one went to Phoenix to visit Joni. I know that you don't need me to go with you." "I just want to go with you," Kenny said. "As you say," she muttered. "So you received notification of your old boss's death by courier the day after it happened?" "Isn't this too unusual?" Kenny asked. He did not receive an answer to this question. "I'm really worried about Ian," Callie told the women gathered around the table at the upscale Italian restaurant Mastriani's. 3 months have passed, and he is still worried about Anna's death. I understand that grief has no schedule, but it is even starting to take its toll on the company. He's made some bad decisions lately that I don't think he would have made in the past. Callie served as vice president of reinsurance at Phoenix General Insurance. Ian was the CEO of the company. Callie worked at the company for 22 years, gradually moving up the career ladder. For the past few years, she has been Ian's lifesaver in the reinsurance department. Maybe it's time for you to get in touch with your boss on a more personal level, chuckled Joni Caputo, Ian Ross's personal administrator. He was always partial to you, and it's not like you've never noticed him looking up your skirt before. All four women at the table giggled like 15-year-olds. They all admired their boss, and they all had to admit that he was handsome and still in shape for his 60 years. So, we put you in the role of personal sacrifice for the collective good, Chandra Ferguson announced. Undo the extra button on your blouse, shorten your skirts and dresses a couple more inches, bend over a little more than usual, and maybe lean your big tits against his hand from time to time. Yes, and we will cover for you in front of other employees to reduce suspicion to a minimum, added the fourth woman, Elvira Anderson. At the end of the day, this is an act of compassion, and we don't want anyone to get the wrong impression. All four clinked glasses and returned to their food. A week later, Callie invited Ian to dinner for the first time. The blouse was undone, one more button than usual, and underneath was a white bra. She flirts openly with the man, and by the time lunch was over, she felt like there was a bit of the old Ian in him. He spent most of lunch staring at my blouse. At some point, he reached out and grabbed my shoulder. Yeah, he'll be the old Ian again soon, Callie told the other women over lunch a few days later. I think not earlier than in a month. Men are actually very simple, Joni laughed. Show off your boobs. Maybe let me look under your skirt. Show more of your legs. Anything is better than going to the doctor for something that's bothering them. All four women smiled and nodded. This time, Ian invited Kelly to lunch the following Tuesday. She was wearing a tight, dark green silk dress, and when she left for lunch, 2 extra buttons were undone at the top and 2 more at the bottom. The dark green frilly bra was clearly visible, as were the tops of her stockings, when tilted at just the right angle. "Oh, you look sexy, baby," Elvira said quietly as Callie passed her desk on the way to the elevator. Callie winked at her as she walked past, followed by Ian. Elvira smiled as Ian reached out and gently patted Callie's bottom as he followed her into the elevator. She smiled at him. The following week, Ian invited Callie to lunch again and then to dinner. The following Thursday, as Callie left for work, she carried her overnight bag and a bag of clothes into the car. Her husband always left for work before her, and she knew she could hide the clothes in the trunk of her car until a more convenient time to bring them into the house. She thought about her husband for the first time, planning to help her boss overcome grief and depression. Callie had no doubt that she treasured her husband, Kenny. He is her soulmate, a wonderful husband and father. They met as freshmen at Arizona State University and married a year after graduation. Kenny is a certified public accountant and earns a good living. Together with him, Callie raises 2 children, goes on vacation, and plans to grow old together in due time. Callie knew that Kenny trusted her completely, and that would play a huge role in her plan to help Ian. Kenny wouldn't stick his nose where he shouldn't, and Callie knows she's smart enough to keep her relationship with Ian separate from her life with her husband. Ian knew that Callie was married, and therefore he had to invite her to a restaurant located in the distance. In his corner of the world, there are more than enough establishments that cater to people of his income level who want to maintain confidentiality. They had a very nice dinner and had a great conversation. Back at his game, Ian was handsome and charming, both chivalrous and slightly naughty, and Callie knew for sure that her boss was leading her to his bedroom. She willingly followed him. Ian looks just as fit without clothes as he does in them, especially for a 60-year-old man, Callie thought. He seemed to appreciate her choice of black corset and matching panties as he slowly and sensually undressed her. Ian warned Callie that he probably wouldn't last long the first time since he and his late wife hadn't had sex in a while, but he'd taken the little blue pill, so he'd be good for a couple of rounds. They exchanged kisses and hugs for about 30 more minutes, after which they made passionate love. For 10 minutes, Callie lay on top of Ian, burying her face in his shoulder and cooing with pleasure. That was amazing, Ian, she purred. I wouldn't mind spending a few more evenings here. Or maybe in another place? He asked tenderly. Maybe in another way, if it can be arranged, she answered confidently. Callie took a shower and changed into the clothes she wears to work. She told her husband that she would work late and be home by 9, and at least she was right about the time. Kenny ordered pizza for dinner. A box with a few leftover pieces was sitting in the kitchen, and Kenny was sitting in the living room drinking his 4th beer of the evening when Callie came into the house. She walked up to Kenny and quickly kissed him on the lips. "Did you eat?" "I left you some pieces," Kenny said. "I placed an order at Orzo's." "I had Greek salad," Callie answered. "Yes, thank you for brushing your teeth." "You know how much I hate the taste of feta," he said. "You're welcome," she replied, turning away and rolling her eyes. In addition to showering with Ian, Callie also brushed her teeth, although she was sure that her husband would never be able to taste the remnants of sperm in her mouth. Callie went upstairs to change into some comfortable loungewear. She went downstairs and took her usual place on the couch opposite Kenny's folding chair. As she sat and watched some anonymous NBA game, she admitted to herself that she had really enjoyed her evening with Ian and didn't feel the least bit guilty. She did not love her husband less and did not take anything away from him, she concluded. Throughout the week, Ian and Callie alternated long lunches and dinners, changing the days of the week for each time. Every meal ended with sex, once at lunch and twice at dinner. As far as Callie and her 3 accomplices could understand, no one else had any idea what was happening. Callie didn't have to go on business trips often, but when the need arose, Ian went with her, although she forgot to tell Kenny about that little detail. After hiding from prying eyes for 5 days, the couple could by all accounts become husband and wife, and in fact, that's how they were checked into the hotel that Ian had chosen. In fact, the trip lasted a couple of days longer than necessary. Ian and Callie spent these 2 days enjoying Miami and each other. Among the activities the couple indulged in was a day on a boat, naked and with sex. Callie was initially reluctant when Ian began to remove her swimsuit as there were other boats nearby, but Ian quickly changed her mind by starting to kiss her. Soon, her tight bikini was on the deck of the boat, and a few minutes later, Callie was leaning back on the seat cushions, wrapping her legs around Ian's torso. While they were making love, 2 more boats passed by, beeping in approval of their actions. Callie blushed and giggled when she opened her eyes to see Ian waving back as he continued making love. "I hope we don't run into these people in the restaurant tonight. I could die of embarrassment," she said. On 2 subsequent trips, Callie learned that Ian liked to have sex in somewhat risque places. He took her into the fitting room of an expensive boutique in Boston, noting that he had done the same with his late wife several years earlier. The saleswoman winked at Callie as she completed her purchase, and Callie wore the dress to dinner that evening, but left it with Ian at the end of the trip. She found Ian's rough playfulness charming, and her feelings for him continued to grow. Although she didn't want to admit it to herself, her mission of compassion had long since ended. "You're not thinking of leaving Kenny, are you?" Joni asked bluntly, when a group of 4 women were having lunch a couple of months later. "It's obvious that the boss has returned to his senses, but there seems to be something between you." Callie hadn't really voiced the fact that her relationship with Ian had become anything more than compassionate. It seemed to her that if she didn't talk about it, then she wasn't cheating. But even if she did, she still didn't feel like her actions had any impact on her marriage. "Of course, I'm not going to leave Kenny," she said seriously as the other three women listened attentively. "But Ian, well," Callie never called her relationship with Ian an affair, not with other women or with herself. She constantly called it a relationship. She believed that an affair was nothing more than vulgar sex, and that what she had with Ian was something more, although it did not reach the level of love for her husband. After several months of dating Ian, Callie refused him nothing. How long their relationship would have lasted is anyone's guess. But just over a year into the relationship, circumstances took over when the director heading Deloitte and Touche's Charlotte, North Carolina office suffered a heart attack, and the powers that be decided that Kenny Richardson deserves to be promoted to this position. Kenny was happy with the promotion, although the short notice created a bit of a problem for Callie and him. Callie was able to work at her firm's office in Charlotte, but she had to stay another month until life in Phoenix got better for the Richardsons. Deloitte bought the Richardsons' house immediately, but it took time to replace utilities, store furniture, and other usual chores. Callie didn't really want to move, but she knew that Kenny's promotion was a big career move with serious consequences for their salary and life. She had no choice but to agree, especially since she could work in Charlotte. When Kenny left for Charlotte, Callie was able to make sure her last month with Ian was special, which she did by practically moving in with him. By the time Callie left for Charlotte, there was very little left undone sexually between her and Ian. It didn't take long for Callie to figure out that she could visit Ian once a year, telling her trusting husband that she was going to Phoenix to stay with her best friend Joni for a week. Clueless Kenny, as Callie came to call him, readily agreed. Joni and her husband Stan met Callie and Kenny at the airport. Kenny noticed Joni raise her eyebrows at his wife before they hugged. He did not see the reciprocal expression on his wife's face. Joni turned to Kenny and hugged him, as it seemed to the man, insincerely. Kenny and Stan shook hands. "Long time no see, bro. How are you?" asked Stan. Kenny gave an evasive answer. He had already dated Callie's close friends and their husbands several times before he and Callie moved in, and he always felt uncomfortable when those couples got together. "What a fine fellow you are," said Joni, "for coming all this way to support your wife. Have you met Ian how many? Several times? At Christmas parties and maybe barbecues? This is what you do for the sake of your spouse, isn't it?" Kenny said, picking up on Joni's negative vibes. Joni and Stan took the couple to a restaurant where they were joined by two more of Callie's friends and their husbands. Upon seeing Callie's husband, both Chandra and Elvira expressed surprise. Kenny even glanced down to make sure his fly was zipped or that he hadn't spilled anything on his clothes earlier in the day. Over food and drinks, conversation between the couples flowed fairly easily, although Kenny noticed that he occasionally caught silent glances from the women. After finishing their meal, Joni and Stan took Callie and Kenny to the hotel and told them they would pick them up the next day to take them to say goodbye to the body. "Tomorrow at the funeral home, you'll probably remember some of the old gang, but it's been a while. I understand if you don't want to go tomorrow and just do your own thing, maybe rent some clubs and play golf with some of your old friends," Callie said. "No. Like I said, I came here for you," Kenny said with an exasperated sigh. Ian Ross was a big man in Phoenix for many years and had many business contacts and friends. There was a long line at the funeral home as they said goodbye to the body. Kenny guessed that the three people in front of the coffin, a man, a woman, and a child, were most likely Ian's daughter, with her husband and son. He had never met Ian's daughter and doubted that his wife knew her well either. She never talked about it at all in all her years at Phoenix General Insurance. Kenny was incredibly surprised when Ian's daughter flushed and ran into Callie's arms, noticing the woman as Callie's group approached the family. Both women hugged each other tightly and buried their heads in each other's hair. "I didn't think you'd come," the woman cried into Callie's ear, and Kenny heard his wife's quiet whisper, "Shh, not now." A woman in her 40s backed away from Callie, eyebrows raised, then quickly looked down and cleared her throat before looking up again. "Jackie, this is my husband, Kenny. Come with me to keep me company on the trip and to pay my respects to your father. They met several times over the years that I worked in Phoenix. Thank you for coming," the woman said hesitantly, after which she extended her hand and introduced her husband and son. Kenny shook her hand carefully, trying not to squeeze it as hard as he usually did. He offered his condolences and shook hands with the man and the boy while Callie and Jackie chatted calmly for a few minutes. After the funeral, Jackie invited them, along with the other 3 couples, to her father's house for sandwiches and salads. "I didn't know you were that close in the past, but judging by the way she greeted you, you know her well," Kenny said to his wife, as he, Joni, and Stan returned to the car. "Over the years, we have met several times. There was nothing else. She was a good child. About 10 years older than the 2 of us," Callie said, quickly turning to the window to end the conversation. After the funeral and burial, about 25 people gathered at Ian Ross's house, eating sandwiches and enjoying soft drinks. Callie and her 3 companions were in the kitchen, setting out food. Kenny was leaning against the doorway, quietly sipping a Crown Royal, when he heard Elvira ask if there was a tray of pickles and olives. "Second cabinet to the right of the sink," Callie answered, laying out 2 types of sandwich bread. Kenny tried his best not to choke on his Canadian whiskey as he turned and quietly walked out of the room, unnoticed by the women. He may be ignorant, but he is certainly not stupid. His wife could only know where the tray of pickles was kept for one reason. Suddenly feeling nauseous, Kenny walked out into the backyard of the house, practically staggering. Stan found him there 20 minutes later. "Are you okay, buddy?" "You don't look well," Stan said and took a sip of the beer he was holding in his hand. "Yeah, I'm fine," Kenny answered quietly. "By the way, I want to thank you for all the times you let Callie stay with you when she came to visit." "Hmm?" Stan said before realizing that he had been tricked. "No problem. She never caused any trouble." "She's good at this," Kenny said with a wry smile. Suddenly, I wanted to drink more. At some point after lunch, Jackie took Callie by the elbow and led her to her late father's office. Left alone, the younger woman hugged the older one. "I'm so glad to see you, Callie." "So glad you came," Jackie chirped. "Dad would be so glad you came. I just didn't expect to see your husband with you. He doesn't know yet, right?" "No, he doesn't," Callie answered. "I did everything to keep him at home, but he insisted that he needed to go with me. Men, you have to love them because you can't kill them." Both women laughed heartily. "I know that your husband will never understand this, but you helped Dad a lot after Mom died. He was lost. And then you had such a good time together for many years," Jackie said. "I understand that you had to leave with Kenny, but Dad misses you very much. After you left, he never had a permanent woman. He lived for the weeks when you came home." "Those have always been great weeks," Callie said sadly. No one noticed that Kenny was silent on the way to the hotel, and then the next morning when Joni and Stan took Kenny and Kelly to breakfast before their flight back to Charlotte. In fact, Callie simply didn't notice that her husband had changed in any way until the plane was halfway home. "You're kind of quiet. Everything is fine?" she asked. "Not even close to being okay, but I'm sure you don't want to find out about that somewhere over Oklahoma, do you?" Callie blushed deeply and turned away from her husband, as her mind began to process possible answers. She soon realized that answers would have to wait until she got home. They got into their car before Callie tried to find out exactly what her husband knew. "I don't know what Stan told you, but it's not true," Callie said. "Stan didn't tell me anything." "You did it," Kenny said. "I? What are you talking about?" the woman exclaimed, showing genuine confusion and more than a hint of anger. "You and your friends were in Ross's kitchen, preparing food, when someone asked where the tray of pickles was. And you didn't even hesitate. It's hardly a wild coincidence, baby," Kenny growled. "I may be ignorant, but I'm not a fool. So later, when I thanked Stan for putting up with you during your visits, he didn't know what I was talking about, even though he did a pretty good job of bluffing for you. So the only question is, how long did this affair last until we moved and it turned into a week-long free pass for you for the last 10 years? Kenny was busy keeping his eyes on the road, so he didn't notice the sour expression on his wife's face. However, she was a smart woman and quickly joined the fight, so to speak. "It wasn't an affair, Kenny. I would call it a relationship. It was compassion, baby. 3 months after his wife died, Ian became very ill, and I felt I had to do something to bring him back into the real world. Yes, I had some feelings for him. He was a truly wonderful guy, but it wasn't love like you and I have. Most of all, I tried to show him that he still had something to offer, and gave him hugs, closeness, and support," Callie said. "What? Well, repeat it," Kenny shouted. "You didn't have an affair because you had compassionate sex with him? Was I born yesterday? If you feel sorry for a guy, buy him a damn escort or a golden retriever. By my count, you had fun with him for over a year and then came back and gave him a week of intense sex every year after we moved in. By any calculation other than yours, it turns out that you cheated on me." "No, I didn't love him as much as I love you," she screamed. "You've been having sex with him for over a year." "And she only stopped because we moved," he said. "What is this if not treason? And then you lied to me by spending a week in his bed every year as a married couple. You know where everything is in his house. I'm guessing Joni, Chandra, and Elvira know this, as well as their husbands, and probably Gina's daughter and her family, judging by the way she greeted you when we arrived. It seemed to me that this was too much for a person who was just a bosom friend. Compassion? You weren't very compassionate towards me, your husband, when you were having fun with him, were you?" No, everything was wrong," she objected. "He needed it so much. He needed someone. He needed me, and I was next to him. I'm proud to have helped him." Even in the darkness of the car, Kenny could feel the smugness oozing from his wife. He just knew, that she thought she was so much smarter than her husband because she was able to keep her betrayal a secret for so long. Kenny only had to keep his secret for a week. On the second Monday, Callie received divorce papers, and in the evening, when she returned from work, she was found by the bailiff. "Kenny, thank you for not giving me the papers at work, but we're not getting a divorce because of what happened 10 years ago," Callie snorted. "Oh, so you don't think that these week-long hookups over the past 10 years are considered cheating?" Kenny quipped. "He's dead, Kenny," Callie said. "A couple of days ago you didn't know anything. I didn't take anything away from you if you didn't even know about it." Kenny sighed. He had a whole week to think, and he mentally figured out what approach Callie would take. "Let me save you some time, Cal. It was just sex. He didn't mean anything to you. I need to forget about this, because it's all about my wounded and bruised pride." "This is all?" he said. Callie lowered her eyes to the floor. I didn't expect Kenny to be so carefree, at least in words. From his eyes, she realized that he was not at all as carefree as he seemed. "I'm sorry I hurt you." "I didn't want you to know about it," Callie said. "He was dead inside. Depressed, maybe even suicidal. All this was done in order to get him out of a difficult state after the death of his wife. We met, had lunch, and had dinner. The closer they got, the more he came out of his shell. Sex became a natural extension of our friendship, our closeness to each other. It was compassion, sex, nothing more. An entire year of compassionate sex? I think it's like a novel. Secretly having sex for a week once a year? I think it's like a novel, Kenny said. It was a mistake, she screamed. No, the mistake could have been a one-time connection. What you had was an affair, a full-fledged novel, he replied. If it weren't for an affair, why did you continue to visit him? Callie's mouth opened and closed twice, but no sound came out. She cleared her throat. Ian was a wonderful person. I believe I helped him. I enjoyed spending time with him. It wasn't just about sex, she said. Wonderful men don't sleep with other people's wives, even if they're depressed. He knew you were married. I could have refused you, Kenny said. How could you even think that what you're doing is acceptable? You were a married woman. What you gave to him, you took away from me. The intimacy you provided him was mine. You promised me, only me, all your intimacy when we got married. You lied to me and broke your oath, but you don't seem to feel any remorse. What did I do to deserve such disrespect? It wasn't disrespectful. I helped him get out of a difficult situation, Callie objected. Well, yes, of course, Kenny spat. You say virtue, and I say treason. Although she didn't expect that she would be caught, she certainly didn't think that Kenny would turn his back on her so much. After all, they have been married for 25 years. Such love, of course, must mean something, she thought. But apparently she was mistaken. Callie quickly found a lawyer who got the judge to order the couple to undergo 12 mandatory marital counseling sessions. She hoped that the presence of the consultant would make Kenny listen to her reasons for helping Ian. Sometimes cuddling and communication are just as important as sex, Callie said at the beginning of the first session. After the death of Ian's wife, he needed someone's warmth, and I didn't see anyone who could help him. And then you decided that it should be you? That our marriage had to take the blow so that Ian could heal. You traded our marriage for Ian, Kenny raged. No, it wasn't like that, Callie replied. He was devastated. I was just being a good friend. You are my wife. Comforting a friend by spreading your legs is, from my point of view, prohibited. You should have refused too. Like a good wife, he said. This was not part of my plans, but as our relationship developed, it became part of it. I developed feelings for him. Of course, not the ones I feel for you, but feelings of a kind. I couldn't just sleep with him if I didn't care about him, she said. Did the others know? How did you get appointed as his healer? Kenny asked at the second consultation. Callie lowered her eyes to the table and picked at her nail. We all talked about it, non-stop, she explained. I was the closest to him, so it seemed like it was my responsibility. The others had to cover for me so that no one else knew what was happening. It was better for me, Ian and company. So simple? Kenny said, shaking his head slowly. Even if it's bad for me. But again, apparently I don't count. Was I even fourth on this list? I love you, and I always loved it. I love you just as much as the day I married you, Callie said. It's not about you. It's not about you and not about me. It was about what Ian needed, and it was outside of our marriage. This is nonsense, and you know it, Kenny growled, standing up from his chair at the table. You unilaterally stepped outside of our marriage, so of course you're trying to exploit this bullshit now. You put someone else before our marriage. You did not leave everyone else, although you made such an oath to me." "But I saved him," she said hesitantly. "So what do you mean by all those times you had sex with him after you saved him? How then to understand all these trips to Phoenix? Your relationship, as you call it, was nothing more than an excuse for you to be a slut," he accused. "I was not a libertine," Callie exclaimed. "Why don't you see this? It wasn't about sex. He is just a small part of it all. But everything was wrong. The sex and everything else," Kenny said. "You've been cheating on me for over a year. Over 10 years, actually." "It's over between us, Cal." Kenny nodded to the consultant and left the room. "Mrs. Richardson, regardless of your motives, practically meets the definition of emotional and sexual infidelity. And your husband has made it abundantly clear that he will never agree with your point of view. I'm afraid I'll have to stop these sessions," the consultant said. "How could you just leave me after 25 years? Callie shouted at her husband when he returned from work at the end of the working day. "Does our history, our love for each other, mean nothing to you? I could ask you the same questions if I knew you were cheating on me with that bastard," Kenny shouted back. "Does your love for me really mean so little to you that you can cheat on me so easily? And there is no need to say that this is not treason. If you had some kind of intimate relationship with him, then this is treason." The couple's 2 children were unhappy with their parents. Both said they understood their father's point of view, but daughter Molly repeatedly tried to convince him to take her mother's side. Until one FaceTime conversation saw Kenny ask his son-in-law if he agreed with his wife doing what she did. Callie, Molly, and Daniel didn't really discuss Callie's cheating, believing the other would support their feelings. "No way, Dad," said the son-in-law. "If my wife tries this with another man, in a second her ass will be out of this house." "Daniel!" Molly exclaimed in shock. "What, Molly?" he answered. "Even before the wedding we discussed infidelity, emotional and otherwise. She cheated, Moll. End of story. And you do this shit. And every time you defend what she did to your father, I worry about us, Molly." "No, Daniel. I would never do that to you," Molly said. "Yes, and your father also never thought that your mother could do something like that to him," Daniel said. The couple's son, Jerry, did not hide the fact that he was upset with his mother. The first thing he did after Kenny told him about the divorce was call his mother and swear at her for several long minutes. "Damn it, Mom. How could you do this to Dad and to us?" "You're destroying the family," Jerry said. "It's not like your father said," Kalia tried to object. "It's not just about sex. I helped someone. Whether you helped someone or not, you slept with someone other than Dad?" Jerry asked it. Jerry noted to himself how loud the silence on the phone was getting. It lasted several seconds before he heard his mother hang up. Kenny and Callie continued to live in their home together, but slept in separate bedrooms, and the divorce slowly moved forward. Callie and her lawyer questioned everything to slow down the process. She was confident that eventually her husband would see things from her point of view, or at least love her enough to see things from her point of view, and they would continue to live as a married couple. However, over time, Kenny began to communicate with her less and less, and this did not give her peace. "Do you remember how we always talked about how, as we grew older, we would travel the world and find adventures together?" Callie asked one night as they sat in the living room watching TV. "Are you really going to give up this for a lonely life in a small apartment, sitting alone, just because of something that happened 10 years ago and did not affect your life in any way? If you had not found out about this due to my obvious carelessness, we would not have divorced and would still be planning our trips. Why can't you come down to earth so we can choose option 1 and grow old together? Why couldn't you think about this before starting an affair? Why should I forget your betrayal and not you not commit it?" Kenny asked. A month later, Kenny called Joni. He was surprised by this, but knew she was calling in an attempt to get him to reconsider his decision to divorce her best friend. "She loves you, Kenny. You know," Joni said. "Her relationship with Ian was to help him. He was so depressed. If he really needed help, why didn't you or Chandra or Elvira help him?" "Why Callie?" he asked. "Damn, why didn't he see a therapist?" The silence on the line told Kenny that Joni was trying to come up with an acceptable answer. After a 10-second pause, she finally answered, "She was the closest to him, personally." We all knew this. She stepped in and did what had to be done, Joni said. It was Kenny's turn to go silent as he thought. "Tell me, Joni, would you trust Callie to be alone with Stan for a few days?" he asked quietly. "Certainly. She is my best friend. She would never harass Stan," she replied confidently. "You and she constantly tell me that she loves me, but that didn't stop her from cheating on me, her husband. If she could cheat on me, why can't she cheat on you or others?" Once again, it was Joni's turn to remain silent. "Damn," she finally muttered. "Thank you for listening." Kenny was amazed that Callie never seemed to understand the depth of her wrongdoing to him. Even as she begged her husband to give up the divorce, she continued to insist that what she did for Ian was good and did not affect her marriage to Kenny. "If you hadn't found out, we would still be married. We would still be in the Garden of Eden," she remarked during their last meeting before the divorce. After the divorce, Callie returned to the company office. She lived alone in an apartment, not considering it necessary to spend money on a house. Occasionally, she would get together with her 3 old friends, but she rarely received invitations to spend time with any of them at their home. She never again felt such a connection with her friends as before the move, before the divorce. She still couldn't understand why Kenny didn't see anything other than cheating in her relationship with Ian. "I didn't take anything away from him. What could it harm?" she often asked her friends. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one. Third story. It shouldn't have been that easy, but it was. Almost too easy, in fact. If she knew it would be so easy, she might have done it much earlier. She wondered why she waited so long to try. Alex stretched languidly in her lover's bed. Turning on her right side, she stood up and walked into the bathroom. She turned on the shower, adjusted the temperature, and climbed into it. She quickly soaped herself up and was about to turn on the water when Trey entered the room, and they switched places. 15 minutes later, the pair were ready to go. The man leaned towards her, but the woman pulled away slightly so that his kiss would not smear the lipstick on her newly painted lips. "Calm down, love. Let's stick to the plan, and then we can do this for a long time," she warned him. "Sorry." "You're right," he replied. "Your lips are just so damn kissably." The woman smiled radiantly. At least for the first month, this part of her life went exactly as she had planned. She didn't expect anything less. In fact, she expected this to continue much longer. Some would call what Alex and Trey were doing on Wednesday afternoon an affair. She believed that the term affair was too rude. Alex loves Trey and considers their Wednesday meetings to be more than just a dirty fling. Alexis Temple wasn't looking for love when she found it the second time. She had been happily married to Chris Temple for 12 years when she met Trey Latham at an executive board meeting at Parkfield Hospital 4 months earlier. Alexis is the director of human resources at Parkfield, and Trey is the new marketing representative for Riley Gordon, the hospital's public relations firm. Trey was dressed in a charcoal gray pinstripe suit that was clearly tailored to his athletic, 5'3", 100-pound frame. His brown hair is wavy and thick, and his big brown eyes sparkle when he speaks. She feels butterflies in her stomach when he looks at her. Over the next few months, they communicated several times before Alex realized that her feelings for Trey were more than superficial. To call it an affair would be wrong. This is a relationship for which she has nothing to apologize for or feel guilty about. On Saturday afternoon, Chris Temple walked to the mailbox and picked up a handful of letters and miscellaneous correspondence that had been dropped there that day. The handful contained 2 envelopes from Indiana containing license plate stickers and printed 2023 registration documents. Chris opened the envelope addressed to him, attached the new sticker to his license plate, and placed the registration in the glove compartment of his car. He then opened the envelope addressed to his wife, placed a new sticker on her license plate, and tried to put her registration in the glove compartment, but the glove compartment was locked. Who locks their glove compartment? Chris thought angrily, returning to the house. He took his wife's car keys from the shelf, opened the glove compartment, and put in the new registration. He closed the box and was about to leave when a crazy thought came to him. Chris opened the glove compartment again and looked inside. There he found the car's owner's manual, the last 3 registrations, and a cell phone, the only thing that surprised him at that moment. Crap, 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 he muttered to himself. Chris knew his wife was upstairs in the shower. As had been customary for the past 6 months, she returned home about 20 minutes early from her Saturday morning workout and, as usual, went straight to the shower. He slowly turned on the phone and waited until it booted up completely, then looked at his call history. Since she didn't expect anyone to find her phone, she didn't clear her call history. There was a short list of calls, but a long list of text messages, all from one Trey Latham. Even before he saw the text messages, Chris knew his 13-year marriage was over. Reading the messages didn't change his opinion at all. Chris turned off the phone, put it back in the glove compartment, and locked it again. After hanging his wife's keys back on the rack, he listened for a second, hearing the shower still running upstairs. He went outside to mow the yard and think. The messages told Chris that his wife had been having an affair with Trey Latham for almost a year. He remembered that her late Wednesday evenings in the office began around this time. Apparently, she took a long lunch break and then added it to the end of the workday so that she could get some work done. About 6 months ago, judging by correspondence, they added Saturday mornings to their game days. Chris remembered that this coincided with his wife starting to train at a local gym. Tears welled up in my eyes. He slammed both hands on the handle of the lawnmower. Hearing the sound of a mower from the second-floor bedroom, Alex smiled. She knew that Chris liked to mow the yard, both for exercise and because he actually liked the look of a well-kept yard. As she got dressed to enjoy the rest of her Saturday, she realized that she was truly lucky. She had an adoring husband and a hot young lover. It had been almost a year since Alex had expanded her sex life to include Trey, and everything was going just as she had planned. Thanks to careful planning and good organization, her life had never been more fulfilling. A loving husband, 2 wonderful children, a great job, and a 29-year-old second husband who filled the emotional and physical gaps she felt were in her marriage. Yes, there were times when she felt almost depressed, but mostly she knew that she was living life to the fullest. By taking a lover, a second love, she essentially completed what she wanted in life. She did not take the easy way out. She lived her life to the fullest, so it seemed to her. She lived life to the fullest on this day, and it meant being able to have sex with 2 different men on the same day, which was very lustful, and always resulted in mind-blowing pleasure when she managed to get her husband to make love to her in the evening, after earlier in the day, her lover had made love to her. After sex with Trey, Alex always showered and cleaned herself thoroughly, so she had no problem with Chris initiating sex with her on those nights. In fact, after she was sure that her husband would not be able to find out that she had sex earlier in the day, She began to initiate sex herself in order to get additional excitement from her own naughtiness. Alex and Trey's relationship was actually love, and not just lust. The young man was warm and intelligent. His interests were different from those of her husband, which, in her opinion, made her life more fulfilling. Trey knew from the beginning that she was married and loved her husband, but she had more than enough love to include Trey in her heart. As for sex, Trey is 13 years younger than her husband and more strong-willed both personally and physically. He has abs and about 14 kilograms of additional defined muscles on his body. Sex with each of them was also different. With Chris, they usually made slow, passionate love, but with Trey, the sex was rougher and more physically intense. That Saturday, Alex didn't get to have sex with the two men because Chris sneaked out that evening, using the excuse of being tired. She had to admit that he looked a little out of place as he walked into the house after mowing. In fact, Chris was glad that he didn't throw up when she tried to start something. As he lay facing Alex, he thought about how many times his wife had slipped him careless seconds. Chris was the vice president of finance for a mid-sized tool and die manufacturing company. Every morning, he arrived at work at 7 o'clock, refilled his Keurig coffee maker, and rummaged through his email inbox. The plant officially began work at 8 o'clock. At 8:15, he walked into the office of production manager Bob Casey, a friend who had divorced his wife of 15 years 5 years earlier. "Do you have a few minutes for something personal, Bob?" he asked, and when Bob nodded, Chris walked in and closed the door behind him. This can't be good, Bob decided. 5 minutes later, Bob had the whole story from Chris and was on the phone with his divorce lawyer, who was an old college friend of his. Bob's friend hosted Chris that same day, unscheduled. Alex was shocked when she was handed divorce papers at the hospital the following Wednesday after returning from her date with Trey. Little did she know that her husband was unhappy in their marriage. She completely failed to notice the irony of how timely the documents were handed to her. While she was trying to piece everything together, it didn't even occur to her that Chris had found out about her relationship with Trey. As soon as she calmed down enough, Alex called her husband. "Why? Why?" she asked through tears. "What did I do wrong?" "Seriously? Are you still asking? You've been having an affair for about a year now, and you still can't understand why I'm divorcing you?" Alex was stunned for the second time in a matter of minutes. She continued to sob, but she had no words for Chris, so he ended the call. As Chris expected, Alex was waiting for him at the house when he returned, rather than staying late at work as usual. "Won't Mr. McCoy be upset with you for not making up the hours for that long lunch?" Chris asked, entering the house from the garage. "I love you, honey. You know. I'm sorry I didn't tell you about Trey, but I felt it was best for everyone," Alex said. "For all?" Chris interrupted. "You and your lover are not everything." "What about me? Am I not a part of everyone?" "Yes, part of it," she said quietly. "I guess I need to explain." "Do you think so?" Chris chuckled. I didn't tell you about Trey because I knew you wouldn't understand, and you'd ruin everything like you're doing now," she began. "Am I ruining everything? Sorry, Mother. What exactly am I spoiling?" Chris growled. "I wasn't looking for this relationship, Chris. It just happened, and I'm glad about it. Trey is a wonderful man. You'll like him if you get to know him better. This is much more than a novel. This is much more than sex, than lust. I love him just like you, Chris, and I can't give him up, just like I can't give up on you. But we are married." "You can't love two men at the same time," Chris objected. "No, I can. Marriage does not mean that it is possible to automatically turn off your emotions, turn off love. You are my first love. He is my second. I am capable of loving several men at the same time. It's not a question of one or the other. Alex said. Trey understands that I already have a full life. He is ready to be satisfied with the little time I have for him. You and the family get the lion's share of my time, as it should be. I didn't take anything away from you and the children. I just added something for myself, besides you and the children. Trey is not your husband. He is an interventionist. He should be grateful for any time he gets from you. But I am your husband, and you have 2 children. All this time should be given to us, Chris said. I love my life as it is now, and I don't want to change anything. I need you all, Alex said. I don't want to get a divorce. Yes, but I didn't want my wife to sleep with another man. Apparently, we don't always get everything we want, Chris said. Remember when we got married, baby? Do you remember the words love, honor, and cherish? How can sex with another man be love, honor, or saving me? You talk about it so dirty, disgusting, Alex said. There is nothing like it here. From your point of view, maybe. For me, it definitely is, Chris said. She growled. The argument ended when the couple's 2 children came downstairs to greet their father. Both parents knew that their children had heard the heated conversation. The children, 13-year-old Josh and 10-year-old Kayla, looked very awkward. Sorry you had to hear that, Chris said. In the future, we will try to behave more like adults. But yes, we are getting divorced. We both still love you, and you guys had nothing to do with our breakup. I agree with everything your father said, except that there will be no divorce, Alex said. He won't be so selfish as to ruin your lives because something happened to him. He won't ruin your life because he didn't change it, Chris said. Mother, did you cheat on your dad? How could you? Kayla screamed. Alex winced with displeasure. She looked first at her daughter, then at her husband. Watch your language, Kay. I'm still your mother, Alex rasped. Only because I can't divorce you, the girl shouted back and ran upstairs to her room. Well, that was nice, Chris said to no one in particular. I think we should have a family meeting while we eat. Josh, bring your sister so we can talk. As Alex sat and looked at the other 3 members of her family, they had a candid discussion about her infidelity and her impending divorce. He told the kids he was filing for joint custody instead of letting Alex take custody of them. You can't take my children away from me, Chris, she shouted. And I'm not going to, but you won't get primary custody either. You can't cheat and make me a dad just for the weekend, he snapped. So who is the guy you're cheating on Dad with? Josh asked his mother. This is hardly appropriate, young man, Alex began. I think it's very appropriate, Chris interjected. The children are old enough to hear the truth no matter what you want. Chris took a few minutes to tell the kids everything he had learned about Trey Latham over the past week. Alex was surprised at how much her husband knew about her lover. He had already become a habit of surprising her, and he did not hesitate to tell his children about what he had learned. Alex spent most of this part of the conversation looking at her plate. There will be no divorce, children. I just need to get your father to see things the right way, Alex said, picking up the empty plate and glass and walking into the kitchen. Both kids looked at Chris, who shrugged. They both knew their father well enough to know that he was not the kind of man who would put up with a cheating wife. After finishing dinner, the kids headed straight to their rooms, but not before Josh said, We're here if you need us, Dad. We'll talk, but we don't want to get in the way of stray bullets, if you know what I mean. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it, Chris replied. After dinner, the family usually gathered in the family room to watch a movie or a few TV shows, unless the children were busy doing homework. Alex was sitting in the living room, ostensibly reading a book, when Chris went into the family room to watch Jeopardy! He smiled to himself as he sat down at the table, knowing that Alex hadn't read a book in months. Sitting in the living room, Alex fought back tears as she thought, and occasionally turned the page of her book to make it look like she was reading. 6 hours ago, she thought she had an ideal life. Now she knew that her marriage was hanging by a thread, and her perfect life would go downhill if she couldn't get her husband to understand what she wanted, what she needed. Chris portrayed her relationship with Trey as vulgar, almost base, although in reality, everything is not at all like that, according to Alex. Her husband is a good man, maybe even a wonderful one, but he is not without flaws, weaknesses, if you will. Trey's arrival in her life filled those gaps, and their sex was an expression of their love, not the gratification of lust. Well, mostly, she had to admit. She hid her relationship with Trey from Chris because she knew her husband would never allow it, but now that he found out, the relationship looked wrong. Alex believed that she had thought of all the details to keep her relationship with Trey a secret. She had provided for all the little things, including the fact that their sex life remained almost the same as before. Trey arrived without increasing or decreasing the number or intensity of their lovemaking. She racked her brains trying to understand how her ignorant husband suddenly guessed about this. Until a few hours ago, Alex considered herself the smarter wife, including because she managed to hide her relationship with Trey for almost a whole year. She had to admit that the first time Chris enjoyed her body, hours after Trey's, made her feel superior. Trey seemed quite happy with the state of his relationship with Alex. Although she is 13 years older than him, she has the body of a much younger woman, a beautiful face, and is smart and sociable. He was surprised at how quickly he managed to get this seemingly happily married woman into bed. She made it clear that she was interested in more than just mattress gymnastics, although she did not seek to replace her husband. This more than suited Trey, who enjoyed the freedom of being a bachelor. The only request Trey made of her was to add a second day to their weekly dates. At first, Alex refused, but after a month she enthusiastically agreed, and so began Alex's Saturday classes. Trey tried to pretend to sympathize with Alex's situation when they met for lunch at a restaurant located away from the house where they sometimes met to eat. She called the young man to arrange a meeting shortly after arriving at her office. "Honestly, Alex, if you get divorced, it will give us more time to communicate. That's not too bad for me," Trey said, taking a bite of his sandwich. "But I know that you don't want a divorce. Are we really going to have to separate? I hope no. I hope I can make him see things my way," Alex said. "He's always been reasonable, and I know he still loves me. So if I can appeal to his sense of justice..." "If I had a choice, I wouldn't give up any part of you," Trey interjected. "Why should your husband?" "Because he loves me, and I just need to make him understand that maintaining the status quo makes me happy and doesn't affect our love for each other," she said. "But until I can convince him, I think we need to calm down a little. It would only hurt the matter if I looked like I was rubbing his face in it." Chris wasn't surprised when Alex didn't show up for her workout on Saturday morning. He knew she was smart enough to step back, at least visually, from her relationship with Trey. Still, he just had to poke the bear to gauge her reaction. "At this point, you might as well go to your lover, baby. I've already filed for divorce and I'm not going to change my mind," Chris said as he and Alex sat in the family room while their children were outside. "Just because you applied doesn't mean you can't change your mind, honey," she said. "Do you love me, Chris? What about children? More or less than me?" she asked quickly. Alex caught him off guard. She could see the wheels turning in his head, trying to find the right answer. "I love you all equally, but in different ways. You know it." "What do you mean?" Chris asked. "To the fact that people can love many people on different levels, different and the same at the same time," she said. "I love you, the children, and Trey, everyone equally, and at the same time in different ways. I can't stop loving any of you. I love you, Chris, and I need you. You are my husband, and as the father of my children, you can have me most of the time. But I also love Trey. in a different way, and at the same time just like you. But since he is not a member of our family, he has to be content with less of my time. Although he would have liked more, he accepted the role. If you loved me as much as you always say you do, you would graciously accept your dominant role and be happy, for both you and me. But you stubbornly ignore the obvious, Al, Chris said. Trey is not part of our family, so he cannot be loved to the same degree as the children and I, and should not be given a minority role in this family structure. Family is what we say, Alex said. I want to include it in ours. I am a good wife and mother. Of course, you can give me this little bit if you love me as much as you say. Of course I can't. I will not allow you to leave our family to take a lover. And for your information, I don't love you as much as I did 2 weeks ago. Unfortunately, you can't stop loving someone overnight, but your blatant disrespect for me over the last year has really eroded my reserves of love, Chris said. I didn't disrespect you. I love you as much as I always have, Alex said. So you never loved me as much as I loved you. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been able to have a lover, Chris said. He is more than a lover. He's like a second husband, she said. Yes, younger husband. I see, Chris muttered. Every night, Chris slept on the sofa in the family room, despite his wife's constant urging to return to their bedroom. We can't talk unless we're in the same bedroom at night, she noted. Alex's eyes got big when, at their first meeting with the lawyers, Chris's lawyer started talking about selling the house and dividing the property. You can't be serious. I don't want to get a divorce, Alex said. Well, it will happen, so get used to it. We need to sell the house so we can both afford something bigger than a closet, Chris said. Fine, you won, Alex practically screamed. I'll leave him, I promise. As if I can trust your promises. You had no problem breaking our oath. I don't understand why I should trust your promises. You'll figure out a way for me not to catch you next time, and you'll cheat behind my back, Chris said. It's not about winning, you stupid woman. It was me who lost. Our children lost. Alex lowered her head in shame. What if I let you take a toy? Will we be even? She asked. You just don't understand, Al. I probably wanted just you and me. Chris felt uneasy when a week later, his father-in-law and mother-in-law called and asked why he and their daughter were getting a divorce. He decided that since they were her parents, she should have told them. He always got along well with Alex's parents, calling them Mom and Dad, just like he called his parents. I'm really sorry, guys, he said sadly. I didn't call because I thought Alex would tell you. You know what they say when you assume. His father-in-law gasped when Chris told them both that their daughter was cheating on him with Trey Latham. Are you sure, son? That doesn't look like my girl, George Taylor said breathlessly. Well, it's not really treason, George. She loves them both. And she doesn't want to get a divorce, said Velma Taylor. Two mouths opened wide in shock, a mile apart. What the hell is going on here, Velma? George barked. What do you know about this? He's a good guy, George. You'd like him. She doesn't cheat. She loves them both, Velma said. What nonsense are you talking about, Velma? Explain everything quickly and clearly, otherwise there will be a second divorce, said George. Chris's mother-in-law apparently knew about Alex's infidelity, but continued to insist that it was not cheating because her daughter loved both men. This is not cheating, but polyamory, Velma said confidently. Well, if this is polyamory, then why don't I have anyone on my side? And why do I seem to be the only one who hasn't been told about these plans? Well, apparently me and Dad, Chris said. She cheated on Chris, and you remained silent? I owe you some, Vel, George said. Sorry, son. He's a good guy, George. You'll see that when you meet him, Velma said. Will you meet? I don't want to meet my daughter's boyfriend. He wouldn't have sex with a married woman if he was such a nice guy, George said. Thank you for your understanding, Dad, Chris said. Trey held back his personal celebration of the end of his divorce from Alex, trying to look concerned, but in reality he wanted to jump and scream. After a year in which he sought to spend more time with his mistress, he was going to get his wish every 2 weeks, since Alex and Chris would be getting their babies for a week each. Alex tried her best to avoid seeing Trey the first week Chris had the kids, but after crying for a week, she practically begged to spend a week with Trey the next time Chris was with the kids. That first Monday, when Alex stayed overnight, Trey made dinner and dessert for the first time since they had been together. Trey placed an order at his favorite Italian restaurant, and everything was ready when Alex walked in on him after work. Wow. Candles and everything else. Very kind, Trey. A girl can get used to this kind of treatment, Alex said. Trey played Alex's favorite music, classical, on the stereo throughout dinner. She smiled broadly at the young man, noting to herself that her now ex-husband only liked classic rock. She smiled even wider when, after finishing the meal, he lifted her to her feet and spun her around in a slow dance to several songs. They cleaned themselves up and retired to Trey's bedroom, where they spent the rest of the night having sex, first gentle and then more energetic. Alex was sure that the evening gymnastics in the bedroom was one of the best in her life. Maybe divorce won't be so bad after all, she thought to herself. Trey was delighted when he woke up this morning hugging Alex. 20 minutes and one change of position later, they lay face to face, breathing heavily from exertion. "Damn it, I'll be late if I don't hurry up," Alex said. "Well, let's save time by taking a shower together," Trey suggested, raising his eyebrows. "It definitely won't save time," Alex replied. "You will stay here until I finish. I promise to be quick." Friday night was the first time they were together at a restaurant in public. Alex was wearing a sexy short red dress that she bought especially for the occasion. "Damn, woman, you're gorgeous," Trey said. She knew she looked sexy, and she and Trey made an attractive couple. Several times during the evening, she saw men staring at her. Alex was physically tired when she left Trey's house late Sunday night to pick up the kids from Chris's house. She and Trey had sex late into the night on Friday night, 4 times on Saturday, and 2 more times on Sunday. Having a 29-year-old full-time partner was physically more challenging than Alex was used to. A month later, Alex trudged back to the car to pick up her children. As had already become customary, she was quite satisfied sexually, but on the way home she felt that she was missing something. It seemed that the more time she spent with Trey, the more their relationship developed sexually and eroded emotionally. She rubbed her right wrist, reminding herself of the scratch she received when Trey handcuffed her to the headboard, a new experience for her. Admittedly, the pleasure in handcuffs was thunderous, but at the same time she felt somewhat devalued, realizing that Trey had forced her into submission. When Trey pulled out the handcuffs, she expressed reluctance, but he quickly got over it, after which she lay down separately from the young man, noting to herself that Chris had never made her feel like anything other than an equal partner in bed. She mentally brushed it aside, deciding that it was most likely just a generational difference between her ex-husband and her lover. Despite the fact that the children knew about Trey, during the weeks when she had children, Alex only interacted with him a couple of times a week, and always during work hours. She has not yet introduced her second love to the children. On Wednesday, when Alex called, Trey did not answer the phone or return calls. When he didn't call at noon on Thursday, she became worried and called him on his work phone. The Riley Gordon receptionist wasn't too eager to talk about Trey's whereabouts until Alex admitted that she was Trey's girlfriend and couldn't contact him. "He's been in the hospital since Tuesday evening," said the girl on the other end of the phone. "Apparently, he got into some kind of fight near his favorite sports bar and was very badly injured. Perhaps that's why you couldn't reach him." The receptionist gave Alex the necessary information, and a few minutes later she was on her way to the hospital. 15 minutes later, she was looking at Trey's beaten face. "Why didn't you call me?" "I found out about this 2 days later from your administrator," Alex said. Due to his injuries, Alex couldn't decipher the look in Trey's eyes. He had a broken nose, 2 black eyes, and, she discovered, 2 broken ribs and bruised testicles. "Because your ex-husband did this to me." "I know that," Trey muttered. "This unscrupulous bastard didn't do it himself, but paid someone. He will pay for everything when the police catch these 2 thugs." No, this can't be true, Trey. Chris is too good to do that. He is one of those who divorced me as soon as possible, but would never harm anyone. I think that's why I thought I could have 2 husbands, Alex said. "Yes, and what came of it?" Trey growled. "I'm telling you, he's a weakling and not the good guy you think he is. He will end up in prison. I will not stand in ceremony with him just because he is the father of your children. I'm sure he didn't do it, but still, Trey, you should have called me. I shouldn't have found out about this 2 days after something happened." Considering how cold and calculating Chris had been when he filed for divorce, Alex couldn't be sure that her ex-husband hadn't had a hand in Trey's beating. And if this is not so, then she will have to admit that she herself is partly to blame for the beating. "What the hell, Chris? Does your ego feel better now?" Alex shouted to her ex when he answered the phone that same day. Why the fuck are you screaming?" Chris said quietly in response, wondering what his ex-wife was babbling. "Nice try, Chris. Trey is very angry and in a lot of pain, and when you get caught by the cops, you're going to jail." "I can't calm him down," she said. "As you say," Chris answered and ended the conversation, still not understanding what Alex was shouting about. Alex had to admit that Chris actually looked confused by what she was saying. She wondered when he had become so good at pretending to be innocent. How ironic. The police showed up at Chris's house about 20 minutes after he talked to Alex on the phone. "I made fresh coffee. I was waiting for you guys since my ex called a few minutes ago. From what she said, I'm guessing something happened to her beloved second husband. And I'm the #1 suspect," Chris said. Chris poured coffee for both officers and patiently answered questions for about 15 minutes. As they left, the officers agreed that it did not appear that the jilted ex-husband was a suitable suspect. A month later, police ruled Chris out as a suspect in Trey's beating. A few weeks later, Chris and his father-in-law were sitting quietly in a bar on the outskirts of town, enjoying a couple of glasses of Angel's Envy rye. "Thank you, Dad." "I owe you a big debt," Chris said quietly. "The damned police were absolutely sure that I was involved in beating this stupid bastard. Yes, you were such an obvious target that they simply could not help but notice you. But you don't owe me anything. I owe you this for what my stupid daughter did to you. You were a good husband and a great father to my grandchildren," said George Taylor. "I'll tell you what. From now on, you will have to buy drinks. I can get used to this expensive booze." They both clinked glasses and took a sip of the amber liquid. 2 months after Trey's attack, Alex had not had sex for so long that she could hardly stand it. She had met another young man for whom she had developed feelings, and although it was not love, she needed physical intimacy. From having 2 husbands providing intimacy just a few months ago to having had no intimacy for 2 months, Alex was desperate. She thought about bringing it up with Trey, but their relationship wasn't as close as it had been before the attack, and since he didn't mind being the other man in a polyamorous relationship when she was married to Chris, he should be fine being the first man in such a relationship. For her own peace of mind, she decided that, if necessary, she would ask for forgiveness later, but would not be the first to seek permission. Delmont Lafleur was almost as big as Trey. 5'9", 98 kilograms, and he looked maybe a little better, although not quite as rugged. He grew up in New Orleans and had a mixture of Cajun and old-fashioned Southern accent. He is 25 years old, more polite, but less arrogant than Trey. He works as a junior manager at a local firm, and from the moment Alex met him in line at the local Starbucks a few months ago, she wondered if he could replace her ex-husband in the new polyamorous trio. I decided it was time to find out. By the time Trey was physically able to have sex again, Delmon had firmly occupied his former role as Alex's second husband. Alex saw her second boyfriend twice a week in the weeks when she had children who were old enough to take care of themselves for the few hours she was away from home on Wednesday evenings and Saturday mornings, like she did when she was married. Just as importantly, Trey didn't need to know any more about Delmon than Chris needed to know about Trey, Alex noted. The only time Chris and Alex's lives intersected was when the parents handed their children over to each other as part of a custody agreement and at certain school events. Chris was cordial with Alex when they interacted, while Alex constantly tried to win her ex-husband's affections. It was the children who informed Chris that his ex-wife had returned to a polyamorous life about 6 months after it became a fact. Josh and Kayla mentioned in passing that they often did their Saturday chores early while their mother was at the gym so they could spend the rest of the day with friends away from her. "Hey, she's still your mother no matter what she did to me. Be respectful and helpful," Chris said. "It's not just what she did to you, Dad." "She destroyed our family," Josh said categorically. Chris had to admit that his son's assessment of the situation was correct, but what made him raise his eyebrows in thought was the information that his ex was again telling the children that she went to the gym on Saturday mornings. Chris never told the children exactly when their mother cheated on him, and as children, they themselves never asked about it. Chris put this information off until next week, when Alex had the kids. He borrowed a friend's car and parked a block from Alex's house with 2 Dunkin' Donuts and a cup of coffee. She was already all wet, remembering the morning with Delmon, and did not suspect that she was being followed. Chris smiled as he watched Alex park his car on the street outside the house divided into 2 apartments. He wrote down the address as he finished his second Bavarian cream donut and looked up just in time to see a large, bare-chested young man in sports shorts standing at the door greet his ex with a tender kiss on the lips. "She definitely likes them big and young," Chris said out loud, watching what was happening. Chris took the phone, pressed the button several times, and found out the young man's name. A few more clicks, and he got a lot more information and giggled happily. "Thanks, Google," he said. Trey Latham didn't recognize the caller number that popped up on his phone, thought about sending the call to voicemail, but then decided to answer. "Trey Latham, how can I help you?" he answered confidently. "You can't help me, idiot, but I can help you," Chris said without introducing himself. "What the hell do you want, bastard? Is it too late to apologize to me?" Trey growled into the phone. "I have no reason to apologize to you," Chris said. "But for selfish reasons, I will do you a favor that you don't deserve. Do you know where your favorite girl is now? I take it you know." Trey snapped. "Isn't she with your damn children?" "Well, she is with the child, but not with mine. She definitely has her type. He's a big bastard, probably the same height as you, but a little younger. God, if she keeps this up, she'll be dating kids in a few years," Chris chuckled. "Let's say I believe you. Who is this bastard?" Trey asked. "According to Google, he is Delmont Lafleur, lives at 1234 William Street. You'll have to figure out the rest yourself." "I'm out of coffee," Chris said. Alex barely had time to walk into Trey's house on Monday after work when Trey attacked her, only this time not literally, but figuratively. "What the hell, Alex?" Trey shouted. "How long has this been going on? I already told you that I will never share with you." "A little hypocritical of you, don't you think?" The woman grinned in response. "It was normal for you to interfere in my marriage with my husband. But now that you have become my number one, you don't want anyone to interfere in your marriage. We've been together for several months now. It started when you were incapacitated. I have feelings for him, just like I do for you. If your husband, the one who was actually married to you, left you because of this, then why do you think that I will stay with you because of such disrespect? Trey asked. You are, of course, a great ass, Alex, but it won't be difficult for me to replace you. But you love me. You said you love me, the woman squealed. Apparently not enough, he replied. Alex's stomach churned when she received a call from the county medical center the next day. Alex was embarrassed when she had to tell the nurse on the other end of the line the names of both of her lovers, as required by law. Are you sure there were no others? The nurse asked again, perhaps too smugly. I don't, Alex started, but then I realized how it must seem to a nurse who was just doing her job. No one else. The next day, Trey was on the phone with Chris Temple, ostensibly to return a favor Chris had done for him weeks earlier. Hey buddy, just thought you should know, in case you need to get checked by the doctor too, but I tested positive for gonorrhea. Alex is my only woman, so I know it's from her. You don't have fun with her from time to time, do you? Trey said. In no case, Chris said with contempt in his voice. Although this does not surprise me. After 8 years of single life, Chris was sure that he would never marry again. This suited him quite well, and he did not look for a partner. After a regular Friday workout at the local YMCA, he stopped at a machine to drink Gatorade. The woman standing in front of him at the machine apparently did not understand that he was waiting, because she stood as if she had the whole day. Finally, he cleared his throat, causing the woman to jump in surprise and turn to him. Taking a quick look at her from head to toe, Chris saw that she was Asian, with long black hair tied in a ponytail. She was wearing what he considered cute workout clothes, a tight burgundy top and matching yoga pants. He believed that very few women looked good in yoga pants, but this woman was one of the few. He muttered pathetically. The woman smiled brightly at him, her large brown eyes reflecting a smile on her lips. Wow, great opening line, trickster. You obviously bought this bestseller, How to Court Girls for Dummies, the woman snorted. Chris stumbled back and raised both hands in surrender. The last thing he expected was verbal abuse from a 40-year-old soccer mom. Kidding. I was joking, she apologized, realizing that Chris wasn't really trying to pick on her. It always seems to happen here, by this machine. It was around this time that reality hit Chris's brain. He loved to joke with a pretty woman as much as other men. Gotcha, he said. With smart women, playing the stupid guy always works. You girls just can't resist rubbing a guy's nose in, he said. She smiled slyly. Yes. Okay. Let's say I believe it, she laughed. I'm Jade, and you, Chris Temple. And I would really appreciate it if you made your choice because I really need some Gatorade, he said with a big smile. A year later, they married in a small ceremony. Chris admired her sharp mind and quick tongue as well as her toned body. He learned that she was 51 years old, not 40, as he had originally assumed, and that she had divorced her cheating husband about 10 years ago. She completely shared Chris's views. I don't share my man, ever. Is it clear? Jade said as they exchanged their stories. And I will never act with you according to the principle of two loves. You are my one and only love, and it should work both